I think I have this set up. I kind of did a trial run through here. Oh boy, I got a whole bunch of these coming up. Right there, that one. Let's see if that will. Okay. Can you guys all see that screen?
Yep.
Okay, PowerPoint is up.
Yep.
All right. I think the easiest way is to go through this, and the hard part, because I don't have my screen's not that big to see everybody, and I've got part of it is taken up by the PowerPoint. And I promise I'll stay on the PowerPoint this time instead of forgetting I was doing it and go, because I do have it on my computer screen. This really needs to be some discussion as we go through as more than just a presentation. So if there's anything we have questions, talk about, to go through some of the stuff here as we're going, by all means, jump in, right then. So we can get there. Make sure I'm okay. And you can hear me, right? Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right. As you guys know, we've already been through, quite a bit of this that we've been talking, that prior to COVID, prior to this crisis starting, actually, we were extremely deep into our preparation for the FY21 budget projections. And really at that time, we were looking at, and I'm talking expenditures here in general fund is what we're really going to continue to discuss, at, 4.3 million, a little over 4.3 million. One of the things that we continue to look at and we continue to monitor as we're going through this is, where are these new revenue projections going to be? Are we getting better information as to the possibilities of certain things as we go? It's all still really, really cloudy. Making long-term projections right now is really premature. It's hard to believe that there won't be funding. There will not be things that get to us at a certain point in time. But as of right now, we're not seeing that. So as we're talking, try to keep an idea of what we're doing right now is looking really in a more general sense. May 16th, we understand there could be some new projections that are going to have a little more teeth to them that might be actually something that we could use. We still have another 10 days after that before we have to adopt something. So we're hoping to get some good information there that will give us some better ideas, because it's really hard to project. So what we're really looking at doing is projecting our expenses, trying to make sure that we're being really responsible with what those look like. As we see what the projections are when we go forward, then we can start to make some of those balance moves and things that we know are going to come. But this is going to be, as we've already talked about, a really fluid budget year. And our goal and our promise is to make sure that we're managing it on a monthly basis, even, that we're making sure that we're getting a good hard look. We do know there's plenty of room for improvement. The state of Michigan's financial system, especially as it pertains to local units of government, has been broken for quite a while. I get a notice, every other day, if not every day, from Michigan Municipal League or other things, still talking about revenue sharing, cuts to revenue sharing, and how we haven't recovered from certain things like that. I think that we've done a pretty good job over time of understanding that that's been an issue, but we've went on with life and we've made good decisions as we've gone forward, which is really going to come back to help us in this situation. A lot of the information that I'm going to get here, that I'm going to give out tonight that we're going to talk about. There was Kathy can correct me, was it Monday or Tuesday? I can't remember, that Treasury put out their latest thing of talking, and they're staying Department of Treasury is doing a pretty good job with MML of staying on top of trying to give us more and more information all the time. And we do look, and I've talked with Kathy R. also, that we're looking at property taxes, the idea of what we're going to be collecting property taxes. And if you look back through history of different recessionary periods that Michigan's gone through, those things have remained pretty stable. And so those numbers that have been put in, we're working off of those, but then a lot of the others are really unknown. So I've talked to you when we met a couple weeks ago. I was thinking, and what we were kind of hearing from Treasury is you should start to look at things like, what's a 12% reduction look like? Because we weren't we weren't getting much information back at that time. Some things that have come back where there was a little bit of a change as I went through this we went through the Treasury meetings the other day and some of the talk. They are asking now to say, well, really what we're going to say is you're probably looking at 8 to 10% range. So that's why I'm giving you a couple different looks here. And I'm not going to, I will tell you when you take the 12% reduction and you look at taking 12% of the 4.3 million, and it's really a $521,000 hit. That's a reality that suddenly is like 12% doesn't sound like a lot. $521,000 out of your budget when you're starting to look at things is scary. So we ran some of the other numbers, just looking at what a 10% would look like at $434,000 hit, and an 8%, that's about $347,880. People will say, where are you getting 8%, 10%, 12%? Kathy's done a lot of research on a lot of different models and different things that are out there, but this is kind of the general term that through talking with Treasury and that they're saying, if you're being really responsible at this point in time, this is your starting point. This is a good starting point to be able to label where you're going for the budgeting purposes that we now have. So I've kind of shifted a little bit from saying 12% total and went back to the departments. We had a good meeting this morning that said, let's start with this 8% talk, make sure that we're getting there and we're seeing what that would mean within your department. And we'll come back together here soon. We had some good talks today. We've had some talks that have been going on, and we'll get into some of the more details here in a little bit of what that might look like. But there's no doubt whatever we're talking about in the end and what we look at is going to be a substantial reduction in what we're looking to budget for this year in our expenses. So I would say it's important for us to get a goal out there as to what are we looking at. And I know this is a very pretty broad-based goal, but we would really like to plan this year for an 8 to 12% reduction in our spending for 2021 due to adjust to the decreased revenues that we're going to see. And this is, I don't want to say this is the entire fiscal year. I think that we're all hopeful that we'll start to get some indicators that will put us on a better path going forward. But hopeful and realistic and hopeful in being able to say that's a definite, that would be wrong of us to do. So my first question, I mean, I wrote this, but is this something that everybody understands as a goal that makes sense? That really what we're going to be looking at is there will be a reduction, and we're going to go over how we might be able to get there here in a minute. It's not just maybe a straight reduction in each department and stuff like that, but it's going to be in that 8 to 12%. And I had told you 12% 2 weeks ago. I'm glad that some of the things are changing a little bit, that 8% seems a little more realistic. So I'd like to start there. Any questions, any thoughts on that?
Sounds to me like a good place to start. We got to start somewhere.
And that's true, Raj. I mean, it really is. It's like you've got to pick a point and say, the reality is it's going to be all about management during this time. And no matter what we pick, we're going to have to manage it. So we'll look to start at that point. I'm sure you guys have heard ad nauseum about the CARES Act and some of the things for what it's doing for different segments, but not for us yet at this point. It was $150 billion. This is the starting first CARES Act. We're getting into some different incarnations as we're going forward, but $150 billion worth of monetary aid to state, local, and tribal governments were listed there under the provisions of the act, but there's really no mechanism for it to get to us. The interesting part about the first incarnation of this is, and I don't think a lot of people really understand this, and I'll be honest, I was one too that was looking at this saying, okay, if the state's got $3.1 billion still sitting there, how does it get to us? We know that our losses are going to do with our personnel that have been off because of the COVID and some of the things we've done. What I've really found is that in actuality, the funds can only be used for eligible expenses, and use of funds for ineligible purposes would put us into a debt situation by government. So I think we've done a really good job to this point of what we're saying is COVID related and what we're documenting as being COVID related. But what you're starting to find out is that the eligible items are really, it's got to be expensed during this period, March 1st through December 30th. But what we're seeing is this is much more, and even the state is trying to get some better clarification. It has an awful lot to do with equipment, PPEs, and things like that. People working directly in state police, obviously, will have some that they're gonna look to see that have been involved at Homeland Security in direct things with the federal government. And so what that eligibility is even going to look like, as much as I say, geez, the state's going to hold 3.1 billion, where's it going to go? We may not actually be eligible for this during this first round.
Hey, Matt.
And there's an awful lot of debate going back and forth as to where that goes. Now,
Matt,
yes, go ahead.
I just read an article today about companies that had money set aside and they still got bailed out. They had enough money to run for 3 months or 6 months, and they're still getting bailed out. Do you see any way the state would be saying, hey, you guys have a fund balance and we've got this community over here. We're just going to release to them because their need is greater. They can't absorb the loss. I mean, I would think that some sort of discernment's going to have to occur through the states, and wonder if I'm glad we have the fund balance, but if that'll work against us in that regard.
I was on a Tuesday afternoon. I was on a Zoom meeting, a webinar. It was local. It had been sent out to local leaders, and it was actually with the governor and through the governor's office. And what you really heard in that meeting was, this was a rah-rah state of Michigan meeting. I don't know how else to say it. It was, we're all in this together. And some of the specifics that came out, okay, we're all in this together, but how are we a part of this? How are we going to become a part of this as local units of government? And there's truly still at this point, Nick, no answers that say that. All we got from that was there is this new portion that's of legislation that was from April 24th that didn't have the inclusion that we had all hoped for state and locals. But now the talk is the third incarnation of this will be specific, and there will be mechanisms for state for state and local governments to access the money, but still without the provisions of how do we get it and why, and those things right there. So we're 2 months into this. There's been an awful lot of money thrown out. There's been an awful lot of rhetoric about different things. And I think we all know this is a huge political football. And so where we land during some of this is still yet to be seen. And so as we've talked, and we talked about it this morning with staff, and Kathy and I have had these discussions on and on, is that we're really caught in the middle because trying to project and trying to say what may come to us eventually. I think I told you MML, MCA, and the MTAs all presented a proposal to the state of Michigan of using the same formula that had been earlier set out for the big five in Michigan who did get money, and that's Detroit, Wayne County, Oakland, Macomb, and Kent counties. They got money. But I will tell you, the interesting thing is they're finding is as they're looking at some of these things, they were wanting to use it for personnel cost and use it to go back and cover personnel cost, and they've been denied that purpose. So they've narrowed that focus of what is COVID-related things. We have Kathy got us involved in the FEMA program. That this is strange to me also because FEMA, and what I've seen from that, and we have to attend a webinar on the 12th of May. FEMA has said where they're going to probably kick in from the disaster relief has to do with equipment and masks and all of that kind of stuff. Well, the CARES Act is also saying that. And so there's an awful lot of back and forth going on that says, when are we going to get to some of the cost of people? And that's really where most of our costs are all tied up here. And so looking still for some of that definition to get to us. So long way to go around your question, Nick. But yeah, I think there's still an awful lot to be done that shows. I have not seen anything so far that says, if you look at how the money's been rolling, you already have some things that you're taking care of. So we're not going to worry about you. We had a discussion earlier today about, in the state, families are getting bridge cards for their kids that are in school, which is really cool. Except I've known families that have said, I don't need this. My family's in a good position. I don't need this. And yet you can't deny it. So it's the bureaucracy of everything is, here's the money and let's keep rolling forward. So hopefully we'll find our place in that soon though. So we'll look.
Matt,
Yeah.
what would we have incurred so far since March 1st in the city of Alma that would be COVID related?
Because at this point, Raj, the PPE and the different things that we've gathered have come through the county EOC. So if you're looking at those types of equipment type things, ours is all pretty much wrapped up. Now, I think we could go back if we're looking at, and staff here did a really good job, Aaron, Kathy, and everybody working on the fact of we're able to work remotely from home because we have Surface Pros, we have those things, and I forget, what do we get, 9 of them that we're able to get. So I think those are things that may be eligible in there. More equipment related, the periphery stuff that we had for that, and some of the supplies and cleaning solutions, things that we did. So there's nothing that's real major, Roger. Ours is more people. It's the people and the fact that we have had people working on call, paid on call, and trying to get some of that money recouped will be our thing that we've tried to stick with.
Okay, so people who are being paid for on call and stuff would be COVID related.
It's COVID related, but so far it appears there's a struggle with that real definition of being, because I get it. I think what they want to do is first make sure that people are getting their proper equipments. They're doing all of those things, because the talk has been, you might not be able to go back and filter some of those losses from your normal budget. So they're still hammering that one back and forth. And you keep hearing, well, the next round of stimulus is going to take care of you. So,
Okay, thanks, Matt.
on that. Thank you. So where I kind of get us here is we've got a lot of decisions to make as a group. I'm going to tell you the process as we sit and talk, or the process of me sitting here looking at this, you as a commission are extremely important in this process, because whatever cuts are considering, we got to get as much information as we can. And so the more we can talk about these things, and I need your opinions on things, because I don't want to put us in a position that we're sitting in our offices making decisions, and it's very, very personal to us. And not that it isn't to you as commissioners, but it's very personal to us. And we can't make bad decisions because our personal things come in, and I think we're really good at doing that. But it's really important that the commission and the admin team in the city are really on the same page. And if you don't agree with some of the things that we're talking about tonight, and you have issues with them, let's vet that out, please. I really think it's important. The stuff that we're talking about is we don't want to get caught making a short-term cut because it works right now for the budget that's going to cost us later. That would be, we want to cut our nose off to spite our face. That would be ridiculous to try and solve a short-term problem that creeps back up a little ways. So as we've talked about those things, I've said to the staff here, first, let's look at 12%. Now let's look at 8%. Let's do this. And so those are kind of across the board looks, but those are not going to be across the board cuts. We have certain departments here that they're nothing but people. I think you guys made it pretty clear to us in the last meeting that we had. We don't want to do that. We want to make sure we keep our people employed. We want to make sure we can continue to provide the services that we can. They're going to be cut to a certain extent, but we want to stay as whole as we can from that standpoint. So when I say slash across the board, sometimes that doesn't mean across the board that every department's going to be able to incur that loss. So that's what I mean about not looking just across the board and saying it doesn't matter. We've thought these things out. We do want to prioritize those ones though that have the short-term benefit. They're not so complex that we're having to study and analyze. And I think the important part of that is they're easily reversible. if we start to get indicators that there is going to be revenue coming from different sources or different things change, we need to be able to stay flexible on things. And we haven't backed ourselves into a corner of something that we can't come back to you and say, look, we need to make a change because, hey, good news, we found this revenue source. We've done that. I don't want to put a policy in place that we've made a decision to change something and now we're stuck. And so that's one of the areas. And then we've, of course, talked to our staff that says, please really look at what's essential and non-essential. But it's funny, when you work in government, everything we do is essential. It's for our people. It's for the people that live in this community. So it's a real hard thing when we look at that. So that's kind of what I'm trying to use as our guideline that says, as we're deciding how we're going to cut and what we're going to do, it's important that we utilize this kind of decision making.
Hey, Matt.
Yeah, go ahead.
You might want to think about, or you and the staff, about what, when you talk about essential, you make sure you're all on the same page. What are the guidelines for that? Or is it health and safety? Is it operations? What are the things that define something as essential? Virtually, I would tell you, running my office, virtually everything we did was essential as I thought about it, but I'm not sure the rest of the world would have. So right. It's really, make sure you're clear on how you arrive at what's essential, whether it's in your department or as a city. It also makes it more defensible with the public, because folks have, for lack of a better term, pet projects or things they're really interested in, but those aren't, in the grand scheme of things, perhaps not as essential as something else. Just make sure you have some guidelines that are both clear and defensible if you can, or as clear as possible.
Thanks, Nick. And let me ask you guys a question, because this is a topic I think that bears, and I may be jumping ahead just a little bit here, but one of the things I hope, and I think we had a discussion about it this morning that was pretty good with staff, is that we've seen some really good momentum in this community. Some people will tell you this is a hiccup, and we're going to be back to normal, and things are whatever normal is going to be, but we're going to come out of this and we're going to start to see this thing go back up. Some people say it's going to be longer term. We really don't know that. I think an important part as we're going through this is an understanding too that says, when we start to come out of this, it's important that some of the things that we were moving towards in this community are still intact. And that we're making sure, and because we're going to talk about one specifically in a little while. You would say are the bathrooms in all of the parks that we've been working on for the last 8 years. When you say, is that an essential thing? I think I say to a certain extent. Number one, we know where some funding is coming from for us for that. We sure don't want to give up funding that's there. We have to look at that and say, we've invested so much into this that we're looking at things. So we're trying to balance all of that too. That says, as we come out of this, we're not going to rock bottom gut us that we can't pick back up, start to go back to this community and say, it's still important to do some of these things that we already had planned. So that's what I mean. So the terms essential and non-essential, Nick, and you're right. I think I've probably got to define those better, because I don't think we're at a point where we can only do the basics that are for health and safety and things. We still have a community out here that we have to continue to function, and we have to give them some things that say, no, we're still about Elmo. We're still going to make some of these things happen. So, and I'll get into some of the specifics a little bit.
I would agree, Matt. I think what we need to do is just, like I said last time, is be prepared, but we're also going to lead by example, because if we come out and we kind of have the doom and gloom and we're so worried about it, then that's not what the community needs. They need a positive, strong leadership in our city, everybody involved and on the commission, that we're coming out positive. We're going to do things in the best that we can. And we're going to still do projects that, like you said, that we've been waiting on for 8 years. Can we do all the projects? Maybe not all of them, but if we just keep going little by little, and like I said 100 times, the positive attitude and how we outlook does a lot for our community. If we stay doom and gloom and don't think that the world's going to get better, then it's not. But if we stay positive and we keep moving forward and we all work together like we have been, then I say it's a go.
I think you're right. I think the way we approach all of this is really, and that's why having this discussion with you guys and having this, because the approach that we bring and the what we bring out to the community as we're making some of these very, very difficult decisions is going to be really, really important going forward. We had a talk, we've done so much downtown. There's so much going on. We've hit this stop. We've got some things going on. We've been looking at fund balance to say, we could get these parking lots fixed up. We could do some things. We need to make sure that we're not getting, and we'll talk about fund balance a little bit, that we're making sure that some of those projects can still exist in time and do things. And I think that you'll find, as we've had some discussions today, we've been able to look at the budget and do some things. Thank you, Kathy, for looking through that today. And I think we've been able to find some things that are going to put us in a better space. Department heads are looking. So I don't think, and along your lines, Michelle, I don't think there's any reason for us to portray the gloom and doom. We're very serious about it. We understand the impact it's going to have on us, but we will, and I hate to be that person, we will get out of it. We will get here, but it's important for everybody to know that we're still the community that's been doing some good things and moving forward. So thank you for that.
And maybe I'm saying the same things, but
yeah,
my sense would be there's positive and there's positive. I don't think we want to give a false sense to folks. I would much rather say this is exactly what we're up against.
Right.
And positive, or I would probably define it as more as confidence that we have a plan. This is what we will do. These are the things we'll sustain. But we'll get back. I think that a rather, to me, a calming saying, look, here's where we are. We know what we're going to do. Very honest, it's not necessarily doom and gloom to say our backs are against the hot pipes of some of this stuff,
Yep.
But here's how we're going to get out of it. I think that's probably what folks are looking for, as long as it's genuine and there is some sort of plan and some sort of way to get through this, some strategy.
Nick, I think that we had that talk this morning. I really think that we can maintain some of the ideas of what we're trying to do here. And I think we can, I don't want to be cliche. I think we can come out of this stronger, because if we manage this properly, it is about that confidence level and about the different things that we're trying to do going forward. And I think that will work. So some of the strategies that we believe we need to kind of look at, we've got to act. We can continue to talk about this forever. And a lot of people will talk these things to death, and I get it, but we're going to have to make decisions. We have to adopt a budget by, late this month. And so it kind of puts us into a position of some of the things that we know we've got to do. I've already talked about, don't forget the long term. We need to make good decisions and we need to get moving on things, but we can't cut our nose off to spite our face. We have to look at that. I'm finding I got some pretty creative people here. We will figure out some ways to do things, but that's, as I talk to you guys, some of the creative ways. I'm going to ask you for some opinions, because some of the creative ways are going to alter the way that we normally function and going to be a change. I do think that there's an opportunity when you look at what we've all been up against, of how we've been functioning. I'm extremely proud of our staff as to how they've been able to manage our way through this. We didn't get to practice working from home. We didn't get to practice closing the doors out here and only having a few people here. We didn't get to practice all these Zoom meetings and stuff. We've shown we're pretty adaptive and that we can do things. As importantly, our community's shown they're pretty adaptive. They are functioning with us. We're still getting complaints about stuff. We're still getting those kinds of phone calls we've always gotten. And people have still continued to function through. So I think that we're going to talk about some of those creative ways in a little bit. How do we find different revenues? We need to get on the grant trails. We need to get on some of those things to look at. We need to talk about collaborations. We need to be careful with collaborations. Doesn't mean that we're going out there to start running the show all over the place. We want collaborative partners that really will be partners and get into us with things. We have a number of things we already do. I think we've proven that in Gratiot County, we're very good at collaborating and working together. We have some opportunities that we can discuss and a little bit of things that we might be able to look at. I don't think this is an issue. The next one, do we have areas in the budget that have consistently had a surplus? I would think that most of the department heads would tell you, we've stressed over the last couple of years, if you don't need it, don't put it in there. And so we don't have that cushion built in so that if there's something there, but I've asked them to be honest and really look at that. I think we're getting there. The postponing capital expenditures, I think what we've looked at is we got to be really cautious with this. If it's maintenance related and it's something like that, again, let's not do something and then we have a maintenance issue because we didn't act. And so later on, what it does is it causes us more of a problem. It gives us more headaches because we thought we were saving some money today and we end up paying more down the road, or it causes us some real major issues. The lead and copper issue that we had spent so much of late last year and early this year already talking about, that hasn't gone away. Nobody's given us a blessing that says you don't have to continue on those plans and continue looking at those things. So some of this stuff that we have in capital and some of the stuff we're looking at, we have to continue. And remember, there's a difference. We have different fundings. Some of our funds, from are not necessarily coming out of the general fund. The money has to go to those funds and some of those things. So those things will be still safe and be used. So use it. Nice word. This one is hard. I haven't sent this out to staff yet. I wanted to have a good discussion with you guys. We've talked about it a little bit in the past, but I've kind of laid it out there as to what we will be really looking at. And this is deferring really any COLAs, possibly any merit increases until December 31st. And it's all anticipated based on the shortfalls that we're getting from COVID and what we're looking at. We've all been looking at different things. And so as the result, I've made the decision to say that we probably need to take a look at this point in time and really freeze some of the hirings that we've got going on, except we have a couple positions and some other things that were already in place. And they're actually something that we probably need to fill. We have the circulation manager at the library, and there's a couple other things that we need to.
Hey, Matt.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
But are we hiring the seasonal at the DPW still?
We had a good talk about that today. At this point in time, until we can see, and I'm really looking to the 16th also, that says, let's see what's going on. We're going to hold off. But I will tell you, one of the areas I think that since I've sat down here, I've always been not shocked. I should know this. The cemetery is a huge issue. And if we don't mow the cemetery, we don't stay on the cemetery. Oh my Lord. And I get it. We need to make that. And so we got to make those determinations that say, I don't want to cut my nose off to spite my face. And then
well, that's what I'm saying. Like you said, I know it's not petty, but small pieces, but if we don't keep up on stuff like that, then that's going to cause more headache for the workers that get all the phone calls and the complaints that certain things don't get done by the seasonals, mowing and picking up stuff and all that kind of stuff. So I was just curious about that.
No, and you're right.
It's one of those. Already, so
we were in a process. So at least from the memo, we were in a process prior or during that March 16th date. So those will be one of the ones we talk about. Okay. It is one of the ones I would say as of right now. No, but as we look at some of these revenue streams coming online, it would be one of the first things you'd have to say, no, we need to bring it back because we don't want to run into those other situations. Like things like string trimming and some of that stuff are not going to be as often. Again, because number one, our staffing would be a little bit slower or shorter. And so we'll look at some of those. I've again said to everybody here, any of the cuts that we do, any things that we do that change our operation, that's my decision with you guys as the commission, but it's my decision. I will back you guys 100%. The community is going to have to see that there is a little bit of hurt. That is the reality. I'm also asking our staff to step up and say, we're going to defer these, the COLA and merit right now. But that's our piece. That's our piece of understanding that where can we also take that hit for the community that says we're right there with you to a certain extent. And I think it's as long as we're talking, we don't want to get into having to lay people off, and we don't want to get into that situation. This is one that kind of puts us on a par that we can do it. Kath, I had those figures in front of me, but I think we're looking at some of these things about $63,000 that could be saved.
Yes.
By doing that through December 31st. That's a significant amount of money. I don't want to say it's a good PR look for the city, because I do think, but it is our piece. It could be our piece that we are right there with you. We're trying to look through that. But I think what the staff needs to know is, if these revenue projections start changing, we start to see other revenue come online, they are important to us. These would be one of the areas that we would be looking at to say, if we can do this earlier and get back to normal and get some of those. If we can look at these numbers, and Kathy sent me some numbers, shipped me off some numbers shortly before the meeting today, she's been working on all day. If some of these things pan out, we already know there's some areas we can start to look at that we might be able to make some changes already. And so that's a good sign too. But I did not want to send this out until I'd had a chance to speak with you guys about this. I think we've already broached the subject with most of our staff, who understands that we were going to probably reach this point. I've asked some other people, some other municipalities here in the area, and well, no, we don't want to do that. Then my concern is our staff saying, well, geez, they're not doing it. Why are we doing it? We're going to make our decisions based on what we're doing here. And again, part of the goal from this is we come out of this even stronger and ready to go. And if this is one of the areas that we have to look at, unfortunately, I think it's part of the truth that we have to do.
Okay, let me interrupt for a minute. By taking this step, this is something we can potentially, you can keep people on staff and keep their retirement benefits and health insurance and everything the way it is. So we're making these little sacrifices for each of us, making these sacrifices, but for all the staff as a whole, it's going to benefit immensely. So I don't think there is anybody that would argue with the fact that this is unusual circumstances, and that we are all going to have to try to do some things to get this together as a group. So I think it'll be, I mean, nobody's going to be excited about it, but I do think that people understand that. I think they also understand that we're fighting to do everything we can to keep their retirement and their health insurance and everything enforced and keep everybody on the payroll. So, you know, giving up a little salary from now until December is probably not as big as losing your job and not having anything. So, you know, there's a give and take there. And that's really important.
And frankly, we know, Michelle, to your question too about, you know, how do we maintain some of this? We don't want to put ourselves in a position where we're having to let people go, because we do have things we have to maintain. We're running, you know, basically, again, I've said this to you guys before, nobody here goes, geez, we have a surplus of people and resources. So we're already at that point. So if we can do this and still maintain to the community the best possible service that we can, I think that's extremely helpful. It is about maintaining their employment, maintaining their insurance, and maintaining their benefits. It works all the way around. Nobody wants this. Nobody wants to see this. But if it's something that helps us remain viable for a longer period of time, and again, it's one of those things that as we prioritize this, if we see revenue streams come on, if different things changes, then we will, this is flexible enough that we can go back and revisit. But I also wanted to make sure that it's out there until December 31st, because if I said we're going to do this for a month, and then I had to come back next month and say, there's nothing worse than telling people, well, I know I said it would be here, so we're going to look at it longest term, and then bring it back if those possibilities exist. So
I think that this is one of the least painful and most easily accepted kind of a ways to cut, is to just do this. If you went to any of our group of employees and said, your choice, we can either do this or we can lay 3 people off, what's your choice? This is going to be the answer, no doubt.
I agree.
I agree.
Hey, Matt, you might think about, instead of just freezing vacancies, if you delay the start, even if you delay, let's say you have delay it for 2 months and you have 2 vacancies, that's a third of a salary right there.
Yep.
which is substantial in terms of what you're trying to save. You don't lose the position. You're just not spending on that line for a period of time. So if you can make it work, I don't know what your staffing patterns look like, but that may be another alternative.
Well, that's an interesting, because really, when you look at the circulation manager in the library, we're already, that's 2 months already that we would have probably already been there. The discussion that we have with seasonals today really is, as we get started to certain things, we don't know how long this could go on, but looking at, we know for sure if you get to the leafing portion of, if we get to the fall and we're still looking at doing some of this, there's a substantial difference in how we pick up leaves. I mean, there's just no bodies. If you look at the amount of time spent mowing the cemetery, and maybe we have to look at that when you say the seasonals, we might not get to it as much and we may cut the hours back a little bit, but we're probably going to need those bodies at some point in time. And so my commitment to Bob and Dave today when we talked about it was, look, as we get a better handle on what revenues might be, and I hate to throw another date out because it seems like the state of Michigan, that's all we're working on now is dates. You just keep hearing it's going to be May 15th, and it's going to be May 28th, and then it's going to be this. But May 16th is a date we may get a better chance to look at what the possibilities of revenues are. So we'll continue to try to make those decisions all around those things, and definitely look at those, because we want to take care of our people, but we also want to provide service. And I don't want the excuse that says, well, we're not going to do any of that at all anymore because of this. We've been through that in this community, and even going through a tough time, I want to make sure that we try to continue to go forward. So some of the others, and these are wide and varied. Just before we started tonight, we did get approval that we would be eligible for the work share program. Kathy explained the last time, really the work share program is through the unemployment insurance agency, that our goal would be to take some positions here. And I think now with some of the information that Kathy was able to give me earlier today, it might not be as broad as it's looked. We may be able to do some different things, but we can basically, and we want to keep people working at 32 hours because the 32 hours makes that they stay at their full-time status where we don't affect their health insurance or any of their other stuff, their benefits. But then the state would pick up 8 hours for them through unemployment. I know there's some different possibilities of looking as to how that would look, what it would do. I tie that in with the one right next to it is the 4-day work week. I think that as we've talked about, if there's a possibility of taking a portion of our staff and they're going to work 4 days because they're going to be laid off on the 5th day and receive benefit, it's probably in our best interest. And I think that there is savings. This has been a pretty common practice for other times when people look to cut costs, is to say that we may go to a 4-day work week. And those of us, although I will tell you, almost every administrator that is working for the city of Elma pretty much works a 10-hour day right now. I would tell you that for the most part, if not more, a lot of them. And so we would be reevaluating some of that, but saying through the 4-day work week, the difference being there, our buildings are shut down at that point in time. We would shut them down in order to get the savings. We would depend on what season we're in, what time of year, no air conditioning, no things like that running, to really take that savings and to look at that. This isn't for us to get a Friday off. It doesn't have anything to do with that. It has to do with, it can save us some money. It can get us some things to do, and we can look. And I think it fits in the same vein as the work share program. If we have a number of people off on work share, it's going to affect some of our functions because we don't have people here to do that. And so we're going to be piecemealing who might be here on that 5th day anyway. But it would be very strict that would say, you don't come in these buildings on those days. These buildings are shut down, and so that we can see some savings. The library, we'll be calculating some of that out, but we do know that over the 2 months that we've been going through this so far, it's pretty substantial savings in the energy bills that are going on there. This is an older building. It costs a lot to run this old building. If you're not in an office, the lights are off in the hallway, the lights are off everywhere else around here and everything like that. And we've seen some savings there. So I think it's not this isn't one of those things you just go, well, let's do a 4-day work week because it might save. I think we know there would be some definite savings that we could look at for that. We've already talked with you about sharing of staff. I think that people are getting a little creative, and we need to to understand we have some jobs that can get done. And Michelle, to your point too, I mean, those are some things that if we can look at how do we move people in some different directions. Some of the folks that now this being extended out further. Oh, I should go back to the work share program real quick. Kathy, correct me if I'm wrong. The last email I got right before we got on here, I think we had anticipated it was a longer date, but it goes through August, correct? Yeah.
Yes, but we just heard that, yeah.
So, but it's still a good savings. It's still a good program for us to get involved with, no matter where it goes. So, as we look at,
And it might get extended, who knows?
Yeah, exactly. So we'd like to get in so that we're a part of it. And so if it gets extended, part of that meeting the other day with the governor's office, when she was on there, they did have somebody from labor that talked specifically to us as municipalities of saying they believe the work share program would be a really good program for us all to get in. And so I think Brooks worked really hard to get through it. It was quite a process to find our way in to get all the information we needed. So I think that would hurt. Reduced hours of operations, a little different than a 4-day work week. It's saying that, and now for the time being, at least until the end of this month, this building still will not be open as the stay safe, stay home has been extended. But even at that point in time, in order to handle some of the fluctuations that we have in staffing and sharing of staff and doing some different things, people will still maintain working from home. I think that you've all seen the point of emphasis still is, if you can still work from home, we need to be looking at this even longer term as a real reality. Again, I would tell you, I am very, very proud of our staff as to how they've adapted to that. But I don't think that we come back and we say we're open from 8 to 5 in the building. In order to control some of that, we'd like to look at the hours, making some differences. Bob and Dave let me know earlier today, our shields and guards that we have been built, and they'll be starting to put those actually into place out here at our front counter in the police department at the library tomorrow. And we will be, prior to whenever that date comes, we will be setting up the green furniture that we all love is going to have to be moved. We're going to take away any of the seating places out there, but we're going to have to make some adjustments as to how, in the timeliness of people when they come in this building, so that we're able to control it. What I don't want is people milling around out here and standing here. So we're going to discuss some different hours of operation and what might work well where the public can still get here, because I will tell you again, the public has really adapted pretty well. We have had discussions to the drop box that we have right outside. I watched a guy the other day. I came back and was telling Beth, and we social distance when I was talking to her, so you know. But it was the watching someone. He was in our vestibule where our envelopes were, and he was paying a bill. And I said, "So, if you're going to pay that," I said, "you can just put that in the drop box, sir." And he's, "Which one?" I said, "The silver drop box that's been out there for years." And he kept looking, went out, and he opened the mailbox, and then started pulling on the silver drop box where he was trying to get the thing. It took about 40 seconds of him of getting the thing into the drop box. There's an awful lot going into the drop box. There's a lot of cash. There's a lot of things. We're not real excited about that sitting outside the building. It is secured to the ground and that, but it's not real big. It's not that. So what we're really looking at is taking a look at, I'm pointing over across to the library of using one of their slots, even because we can do something to the inside. They've got 3 of them. We can actually do something real cheap and promote the heck out of it, that we have a drive up now where you can make those drops, and you don't have to get out of your car. You can drive up through the library, drop it in that slot, and we'll create a small box and lock it up. So they're going to work on that tomorrow to get a little bit of the idea of how we can do that. So I think that will be helpful.
And it'll be much more secure.
Should we put one? Go ahead, Kathy. What?
It'll be much more secure because it'll be in the building.
Right. Yeah. We had talked about, well, should we put one downtown? This is a small town. We can get people to come to the library. And as long as it's a drive up, I think like that's a win-win for everybody. Yeah, that's a real win-win for everyone. We've been talking about utility readings a long time of what we've been doing. We've gotten on a much better pace now. It's now tied in with BSNA. We're much better at it, and we're doing those. So one of the areas really may be starting to look to say, should we be looking at doing some reading less and doing estimates? I mean, consumers does it, other people do it. It would be a way for us to to reduce a little cost there. Plus, I think for our community, then it's one of those other things that we're just modernizing and trying something a little bit different. We already talked about the seasonals, the part-time clerks that we've had that have not been here. That would be one of those we'll continue to evaluate of when can they come back? What can we do at those point in times? We talked about collaboration. Starting to take a good hard look at some of our assets and the things that we have, the things that we can eliminate that are a cost to us right now, or making sure we're not perpetuating costs that aren't there, driving cars a little bit longer. I'm sorry to Aaron, I have to apologize because I didn't realize that the car that I drive was supposed to be Aaron's, but I don't drive it very much. Although I have since this crisis, I want you to know, since this started, I have driven that car home. I don't know why I thought that maybe sometime I'd be needed to come in at night because that's the old cop in me that kicked in. I guess we found that's not really the case, but so Aaron didn't get that car. So we have some cars we've already started to do that with, but we want to make sure as we're going forward that we've done that. Looking at that, capital improvement plan adjustments that we've kind of already talked about are some of those things, understanding what are the important things. And then the last one that I bring up really is that utilization of a portion of the fund balance. So before we get into fund balance, any questions, comments, or anything on, are we out of line with any of those? Do they seem crazy? Does it, anything that would you think could cause us an issue that the public may not accept or anything like that?
Hey, Matt, I'm thinking if you're moving that green furniture, that could help solve some of our issues because there's a lot of people that want to buy that.
I know.
So
We could have an auction. Yeah. People like that green. It's amazing. People love that green furniture. Very nostalgic for us. So
I thought you wanted to buy it, Kathy. That's what you were up for.
it's
actually,
nice.
actually Ryan does. He said if the city ever sells that green furniture, let me know.
It'd be hard to part with it because I think when we come back to whatever normal people can come in here, it would just be weird not being here. But I do think we need to open up that space and give us some of that because we'll be able to utilize that space for distancing. I think we all know we're going to be in a distancing situation and it may become the new norm. It may become that this is how things work. So that big lobby may become something that we would use. So the fund balance, and I gave you just a little look that back in May of 2018, if you remember, we created the fund balance policy because, you know, that part of our sound financial management principles require that we have to have a sufficient general fund balance to retain so that we are able to maintain a general fund balance that's sufficient to fund all of our cash flows, that we can stay viable and stay solvent, provide reserves for unanticipated expenditures or revenue shortfalls. I think we could easily say this is a unanticipated process that we're going through right now through the emergency. Provide that cash flow liquidity so that we do have some liquidity that we can use. And then what we had been talking about were some of those planned bigger projects that we're looking at. How do we do parking lots? How do we do some of these things that have just been sitting there for so long that are important? The minimum level of the unrestricted fund balance that we had established at that point in time was really, we will always be at 50. It will never go below 50% of our expenditures for the next coming year. So if we're looking at a $4 million budget, it would never go below 2. We wouldn't be allowed to spend it below that. So we maintain that. It also has the portion that it can exceed. We can't let it grow past what that expected expenditure for the next fund year also is. And Kathy's got some different numbers. I just used what was basically coming off our last statement to end last year. It's about 3.6 million that's sitting there. One of the things we're going through is some different talks about some of the other ways up and down because we haven't established what the budget's going to be for next year, but that could factor into what do we have available to us. When we talk fund balance, one thing I want to, it's there. We're making provisions and we're making a lot of good hard looks at our expenditures going into this next year. I don't want to strap us so bad that we can't function. So if we need to use fund balance, We understand that going in, but I don't want us to say either, well, we don't have to do anything because what will allow is just our fund balance to cover wherever we're short. I think we can manage our way through this because, again, part of the importance becomes where are we next when we do come out of this, that we still have the availability and the fund balance is still healthy enough for us to be able to look at some of the things we've been talking about as a community. Plus, let's be honest, we don't know, does this come back again? Do we have anything else? And so I get it. It's raining. There is a purpose for what's going on right now. I understand that fully, but it's not our get out of jail free card. It's not our deplete our savings, take our savings down even to that 2 million to do things, because you folks before I was here have done a really good job over the years of maintaining that and giving us to be in a strong position for just the position we're sitting in right now. I would like to say that you trust us to look at this 8% reduction across through our different departments, through some of our different processes and plans. I think it's going to be important to know that the end of this fiscal year, because we can say March, April, May, June, there is going to be a significant reduction in some of what we're going to get because of the sales tax issue and a number of the other things. I would anticipate us maybe having to use that. We have expended some things because if we can't get some things back through the feds or through FEMA or somebody, we have made expenditures to get us through this process that are going to come through in this fiscal year where we weren't planning for this to happen. So we were moving along at our normal pace that things have happened. So that may come up. And I'm not saying to you, we will never use it next year. We can do all of this through other means, but I don't want it to be reckless in what we do with that fund balance is the thing. So what we've kind of talked about, I might not have gotten to this might be the last, is when we're looking at some of the benchmarking is looking at what's a percentage of that fund balance that we're comfortable with. We know we have a policy that has some things, but I would rather have a discussion about what's the percentage. Kathy's idea at that point is then we look at this and really on a month, we break that down to a monthly basis. So we're able to come back each month and tell you if we had to, and if we were there. So you have a good accounting of what the use was for and where we're at with that. So I know our policy allows 50% of our expenditures. I don't think we need to go that far with this and say that, and not looking for a carte blanche thing. It's that, is it 20%? Is it 10%? Is it something like that we can do that gives us a much better basis going forward for why we're doing it? So
I'm kind of confused. I guess what are you asking about the percent? What would you spend from the fund balance? Is that the percentage you're asking? Okay.
Percentage of the fund balance that you would be comfortable of us right now being, and I don't mean this moment because I'm not expecting we can have some discussion here and we may have to, have another meeting so that we can vet some of these things out completely. We can put the numbers that we've been working on, attaching that so you get a better idea. It's hard to ask you that right now when you don't know what the potential is. I think, and Kathy, please jump in if I'm off base on this, because I think with some of the stuff that we found today that we've looked in the budget, I'll just give you a couple examples. We have the opportunity to finish the parks bathrooms. Okay. We have a grant that pays for half, we pay for half, but we have $100,000 that we could utilize from the Luth fund to do that, to pay our portion, to pay our share, a good chunk of our share. Allows us still to complete the project, allows it, and it doesn't touch our general fund. Okay. In the budget, that money was going to our general fund. It was being taken out. So we can pull that out already that we know is helpful of trying to get to a better number. The parking lot project that's getting ready to start, if we can get people all back to work downtown behind the Opera House, was budgeted at, correct me, 450,000, something like that.
I think it was 510 actually.
510. Okay. Two things: partnering with college, getting involved with the grant that they're contributing money into for it. The bids came back really good, really good. There's a potential savings there of, David, I know you're on here somewhere. I mean, I think we were looking at a substantial savings that could be there.
Our portion would be roughly about 150 is what we're looking at right now because of that MEDC money and what the college is willing to pay for as well. So number of things worked out in our favor on that one, it looks like at this point.
So these things are going to have a factor in, and that's why I want to, believe me, I'm not saying Jesus have another Zoom meeting, but I want to make sure that we're at this point that we're now starting to get some of that of our personal data together and our personal stuff together from the city standpoint that says we've had these hard looks now. When we look at this 8% reduction through the different departments of what we can do to trim ourselves down, that number becomes more real. Now we can come back to you and say, this is where we believe the shortage is going to be, hoping we're seeing some more revenue numbers that give us a better projection. And then we can say, this is where we think we're going to be short, guys. We're going to have to make a budget that's balanced. We get that. And I can tell you up front, the place we're going to have to play around with is going to be the revenues, because we're going to give you expenditures that we know we can do and what we're going to do. So we're going to play around with those. But in reality, there's going to be that cushion, and we can talk openly then about what is that percentage of fund balance? What are those things? And that number becomes a little more real. And I think from when we started this discussion 2 weeks ago to some of the talks that we've had today, to some of the things we're seeing about possible revenue projections, the good thing is it looks like our having to use some of those things is getting better in our favor. And I just want to make sure that we have a better understanding of that. And so, I'm trying to get two things out of this, and I'm sorry if I'm babbling. The one is the idea that we understand we're probably going to have to use it. Secondly, though, the idea is we're not going to use it without really vetting everything else out that we have, and so that we use it to what it's intended for.
Well, and I'm speaking only for myself, of course. I feel like you have enough healthy skepticism of using that fund balance willy-nilly. So I think that's good. I feel like you understand that we're going to have to use some of it. I also feel, in my opinion, that we have put you in place, and I certainly wouldn't want to have you strapped with, I guess I don't know enough to know about like a limit or whatever. I feel like I trust you. I also want you to feel comfortable in the decisions you make that you have informed us. So I don't want you to feel like you're floating in the wind, but I guess I would need you and Kathy and others to tell us what you think is reasonable. It's just like with the paying for things without approval from us. I mean, I don't want you guys sitting there thinking, oh my goodness, we can't get everybody together or get in touch and we need to make this decision. I feel like you are in positions of enough responsibility and power that I trust you to use your best judgment. But I also want you to be comfortable that you have the support. So I guess I am completely in favor of what you're suggesting. I would need you to come up with the outline or whatever it is we need to say, the specifics, because that part I don't know.
And we would certainly do that. But the goal was today is to bring these ideas to you in case there was something that you really didn't agree with. We wouldn't put a lot more time and effort.
Oh, okay. Well, I agree with everything. I mean, yes, speaking for myself, I agree with what you're proposing, and I think it's sound judgment, and I can tell and appreciate the thought that has been put into this by everyone. So I'm completely comfortable with the hard work that you're doing.
Well, thank you. And what we're looking, we would come back, and I do think now with, yeah, go ahead, jump in. I'm sorry. Oh, hi, Audra. Thank you.
Hi. Yeah, I've been here the whole time.
I know.
So a little bit about this feeds off a little bit about what Roxanne was saying. I'm having a little bit of a difficult time because in a way I feel like we're doing this backwards from the commissioner's standpoint. I know from a staff standpoint, you guys aren't, and what Kathy just mentioned, you don't want to do too much and then find out, we're not on board with it. But I'm having a hard time sitting on this side of it without actually seeing where the numbers are coming in. So I feel like, I don't know how to say what I'm thinking, but I'm a little bit, I don't want to say lost, but I'm having a hard time giving input or opinion without knowing what we're looking at or what the outcomes are. Does that make sense?
No, that makes sense, Audra, and that's really what I was going to get to next. I said,
Okay, sorry.
well, I'm trying. No, and I appreciate that because I can see where you're saying that, because that's kind of my idea. I'm saying now that we're getting some better information, now that and I keep looking this way because you guys are actually on my screen over here. Now that we're getting some better information and we're hoping to get even more on what the possibility of revenues are, we're getting a better grasp on what our adjustments will be. I want to make sure that you're good with the process of where we're at understanding, but we're going to have to come back, I believe, and say, here's what that number is. And I can't arbitrarily just throw something out because we'll be pretending. We're going to tell you if we've cut the 8%, we've done this, and this, we're still projecting that the revenue loss is going to be this. Then we're going to be able to say to you, here's where that numbers are. This is where the number is. And we'll come back before that. This is more of, so there's an understanding of how we're getting through this part of the process. No, I wouldn't expect you to, without seeing some of that stuff, to be able to say, no, I'm really comfortable or anything like that. This is happening like today, a lot of stuff right up until the minute we came on here tonight, it's like looking at things and being able to now project things a little bit differently. And so before we get to the 26th and have to actually adopt something, you'll have that well in place to be able to look at.
And Audra, like I said a few minutes ago, the goal was for you to get an idea of all the different components that we're looking at. And if there were components that we were discussing that you absolutely can't agree with, like reducing treasury hours or whatever, then we weren't going to take the time and effort to pursue that any further. If the commission as a whole said, absolutely not, we're not going to close City Hall on a Friday, absolutely no way, then we're not going to incorporate that into our planning anymore. So we really, because you guys are the ones that talk to the public even more than some of us, we want to make sure that you're comfortable with what we're putting together. And this is the best way to do it, to say, okay, these are all the different things that we can do. Tell us, are there things that you think are okay? Are there things that you couldn't tolerate? And then we'll focus on the things that you think that we should pursue as well. So I know maybe it is a little backwards, but this is really a backwards kind of year.
Well,
That's and I get that, Kathy, and I get that, and I appreciate that, and I really do. Like Roxanne said, I appreciate the work you guys are putting into this, because I honestly can't even imagine being in your shoes. But it's still hard for me to see the big picture and to make those decisions on what I think might be important or not important without knowing what the big picture looks like. Because I may say closing the lobby is a finite, or is a terrible, terrible idea until I see the actual numbers. And then it comes down to maybe that's our only option. So I'm having a hard time, I guess, stating my opinion on some of these things without knowing what things are actually going to look like, if that makes any sense to you. But I do appreciate the work. I really do.
No, and I guess we're throwing things at the wall to a certain extent too, of just trying to say, look, what are all of the areas? And I don't believe we'll probably hit every one of those, because I think that as we're going through this process right now, and again, I've adjusted from 12%, and full disclosure, I mean, I'm talking to Eric and I'm looking at what that 12% really meant. And it's like, well, 12% doesn't seem like that much until you look at it's $520,000. And like, you start to look at where we're going to do that. We're really trying to make sure we can provide service. And I'm like, if we go that far, we can't do certain things. There just will be impossible. That's not our goal. If we can do, as we're getting deeper into this and you are getting better feedback. And the unfortunate part is we're up against a collar too, and a timeline that says we got to adopt a budget by May 26th. Not unfortunate, because you do need to start making decisions and going forward with it. But everything's changing every single day right now. And I got to say this too, and I'm not trying to just pad my staff, but they're also dealing with the everyday functions through all of this while we're going through this, also trying to budget in such a different way. I will tell you this, I feel like I've learned more about budgeting because of all of this and trying to take a look at all of it through this lens. But know this, before, we won't bring you anything that you haven't had, that we haven't vetted out, that we'll be able to go through those numbers with you so you actually see what it is we're talking about. But my take is on this, guys, that we haven't presented something here tonight that you automatically just go, geez, what are they thinking? Why would they want to look at
No.
something like that? This would not fly in the public. This would not do certain things. And if that's good, I think we have a really good path now. And I'll be honest, I think we filtered some of it out today as to how we get there a little bit better and how we do this. And so I feel more confident than I did even a couple of weeks ago when we were talking. I feel more confident I did yesterday of talking about this, that we now have a good path that says to you guys, if you'll, I don't even know how to say it, because if you'll support us where we're going, and it's an understanding, when we bring you back the numbers, this is how we got there. And so there is a purpose behind what we're trying to do. It's not willy-nilly that let's close on Fridays because, well, hell, we don't want to take Fridays off. Let's do this differently. Let's do work share so we can lay people off, and they can do that, and the state will just be paying us money that we don't need. I'd like to make sure that what we're doing has at least cursory from the concept of what we're talking about makes sense to you guys.
Right. And I guess that's what I was trying to say. And I'm not a numbers person. So even when you give me the actual numbers, to be quite honest, there's a reason I'm a commissioner, not a finance person or a city manager. And what I was trying to express was that I have the confidence that I feel like you know more than I will ever know about what is the best course of action, where, and I think that closing on Friday is a reasonable thing. But I mean, it'd be no different than if you came in here and tried to tell me how you thought that my office here at the school should best run. You and your people know best. I mean, I may be a commissioner and may talk to people occasionally, not much these days, but you will know what's best. And that's, I want to be supportive and helpful to give you the guidelines you need to do your job effectively. But I want you to know that I am relying on you to tell me those things, because I am not in there day in and day out. And we have put you in this position. And unfortunately, or fortunately for you, that's where you are. And so I am, again, speaking for myself, I think that everything that you have vetted through and have suggested, I trust you and your people that that's the first line, to go. And there's no way you can give us, I don't know how you would possibly give us numbers when you have no revenue. I know, being a poor person, it's kind of hard to figure out how to pay the bills when you don't know what's coming in. I mean, so best of luck. I know we have that May 26th deadline, but I don't know how on earth you do anything when you don't know where the money is coming from. So I don't know.
A good point
I like
with that.
this.
And
This
is
is
there an understanding?
what I'd like to call, Matt,
Go ahead, Raj.
I like this. This is what I'm going to call a philosophic budget. We don't have the numbers on it, but it's a really good start. We don't have any numbers that we can even pretend we have yet, but we have a whole bunch of, if this happens, here's how we're going to go with it. And I like the idea of having a good, solid philosophic concept of the budget is when we have some numbers to work with, we have a framework that we can plug them into and go from there.
Yes.
That's a good example, because what I see, and I guess probably because this is such a different way of doing this, and maybe I'm being overly sensitive to the fact that, hell, I'm looking for some confirmation too that we're on a path that makes sense. But I think that the hard part is going to be, and Roger kind of mentioned that, we're going to be presenting a budget that I'm going to tell you we can control the expense portion. We can't control the revenue portion, which is so different as to what it's upside down to a certain extent of what we're looking at some things. So we're going to end on May 26th. We're going to have to present you with something. We'll present you well before that, like 3 days, maybe 4 days, but something that says, this is what that number means. This is what that means. And it is the ifs, but we're laying this out as a starting point. And so you'll have a much better, I think, idea of, if A happens, then we'll move to B. If B happens, then we'll move to C, so that we're building some kind of at least there's a plan. This isn't going to be willy-nilly that, oh my God, we didn't realize the revenue was going to be cut this much, and now what are we going to do? Because usually that results in
exactly.
people off.
But Matt, for me personally, you all know that I am a numbers person.
Mm-hmm.
So before I'm gonna, we have to do, like Roger said or Kathy said, what ifs or whatever. But I am definitely the numbers person, and I want to see all the different versions that you all have, like you have planned, because I do study those a lot because I am a numbers person. And so I look forward to looking at those so that all of us can chat about it and discuss it before we approve it. That's my opinion.
Oh, thank you.
Absolutely.
I-
We don't want to do it any other way, I'm sure.
We have to get there, and we have to get there. And to be honest, we're kind of, I don't want to say kicking the can because we're working, but as things continue to change, you're trying to say, okay, what's really the last date that we can say, okay, this is the information we have to go on from here forward, and see where that is. And that's going to come up. I'm anxious for this May 16th, hoping that that's going to give us a little better indication of what we can use. Because I have had the question, well, you guys are talking maybe 12%. What does that 12% really come from? It comes from people at Treasury and people like that telling us that, that's a good starting point. Now we've looked at in 2 weeks' time, well, 8 to 10% may be a better thing for you to look at of reducing. Then we really started attacking our own budget, looking at some things, where can we find some savings? People have done some good things that may make us have to make some changes as to, is it really 8%? It might be 4%, might be 6%, might be 10%. But those things will all be vetted out here by next Friday is the goal. We will have those vetted out to be able to lay those out, Michelle, for numbers that we can see.
Sounds good.
Told you it wouldn't be 3 hours, I promised.
I've been listening the whole thing. For me, where I'm comfortable is you build a budget based on assumptions. These are the best assumptions available now, but they're soft. A plan is just a way, and what you've outlined are what are the tools or tactics to give us a budget that we can live with and we can actually do. At that point, when we start to calculate what freezing salaries are, we start to calculate how much you save on putting in short-term workers or those things. When you put money to line, then you can start to say, we think we can achieve that overall goal by doing these things, but we're not there yet.
Right.
So I'm pretty comfortable with the ambiguity of it because you can't control much more than what you did.
One of the factors will be, for you to just have in your mind, I think will be, as we start laying out what some of these numbers actually mean. Like I said, it's about $63,000 if we freeze. It's about, this is worth that much. You'll be able to, and we'll be able to then look at it that says, now we're gonna have to make decisions based inside of these different numbers. If we can get to that area that we're comfortable with, where we're thinking revenues are gonna be projected, then we may be able to say, no, we can use a little more fund balance, which will stop us from having to cut this or cut that. Or do we need to look a little deeper at this because we want to keep this at a level? So it'll give us, the numbers will then give us those ideas of how we can slide things, and it becomes a little more mobile. And again, that will continue even after we set the budget. That will be a continuous look, and the things that Kathy's put on this last page of what she's going to want to show so that we can be looking at, so there's a good idea of what those things mean as we go forward. Whew.
Hang in there. You got this, Matt.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate you guys. This is new for everybody. As long as I have you here, I'd like to just ask you a question. As we talk about the reopening, first I'm going to give you a little indication. We had a lot of things go on this week that have been interesting. I've had a number of phone calls that ask, why can't I just say restaurants can open here in Alma because Matt says, or the city says, or you can do that. And I continually try to explain to people that part of the process, whether we agree or disagree with anything that's being decided or going on, or frustrated with it, our role as a city government, in my mind, is to say, as long as there's a rule that exists, we're going to have to take a look at it. We will make good decisions. And I think that we did a really good job earlier this week of making good decisions based on some things that we had going. I wanted to spell something because I know the news media is starting to get involved. Monday, when we had an issue that went on of someone trying to open a business in town, there was never a time when the Alma Police Department or the city of Alma said, we're not going to enforce anything. That's getting out there a little bit. That's not true. The reality was you have until X time to close or we will make enforcement. So did we actually enforce? No, never got to that point. Did the enforcement leverage put us in the situation to resolve that? It did. So we are taking the tact on all of these things that say, as long as the order still exists and as long as things are out there and you can decipher through the order, because it's getting more complex every day. The newest one came out today. We are doing our best job to evaluate those. Our police department, public safety have a really good relationship with the prosecutor's office of where we're vetting those things through. The prosecutor's office is working through the attorney general's office. There is a process. It's not willy-nilly. There have been a few businesses that have opened that were nice enough to get to us early where we were able to vet. They're making interpretations of the order. We're then sending those interpretations onto the prosecutor's office who's working through the AG. And so we're getting definitive answers as they come back. So I just want to make sure everybody knows we're not abdicating any of our powers or anything that we're supposed to be doing at this point in time. And I know there's a strong push for some cities to make decisions within their own. That wouldn't come from us either. That would come from this group if you guys decided there was something we needed to do differently. But we are going to continue to function in that manner at this time until something changes. So I squelch any rumors here with you guys. So
That business that you're speaking of is doing an interview on TV5 tonight. So I was interested to see if the city of Alma will be mentioned or Alma PD.
I saw a video that came out after that day that said that we had said that we weren't going to enforce. The sheriff's department said they weren't going to enforce. Sheriff's department may have
I saw
said they
that
weren't
one too,
gonna enforce.
but
Yeah.
he's
The
actually on
sheriff's department may have said
TV5
that.
tonight.
But it's not theirs. But we do find out the media has now been, and actually Mark's fielded some calls and explained the whole thing to them. So we'll see how that goes. I'm interested to hear that too.
Yeah.
Is the farm market opening with our blessing?
Saturday. Yep.
It is Saturday.
Yes, it is going to be Saturday now. And Eric's been working on that. He's got a volunteer that will help us with some of the making sure that people are spaced. And it's a longtime person who's worked down there. I think Eric's probably on here somewhere. There's 4 vendors that are going to be there. Farmers markets have been reopened through the order and to do. And it's, again.
Yep. Hey,
Go ahead,
Matt.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. We have 4 to 5 vendors. I have a volunteer that's going to be there on site all day. Actually, I'm just finishing up their packets for tomorrow with all the information they need to have on site. They need to basically fill out forms that, just like we do here every morning, saying that, making sure we don't have the symptoms. They're supposed to check their temperature 24 hours before the market. So there's a list of rules we're giving them. We'll have everything spaced out. We'll have a hand washing station with sanitizer donated by the hardware. So I think we've obviously vendors have to wear masks, and hopefully we'll encourage people to wear them like they would if they go to Meijer or where else. But we can open. One other thing on top of that I learned today, and we have that in our rules. Since it's food, that's considered an essential item. Non-essential items can be sold by vendors who are selling essential items. So if you see someone down there that's selling produce and they have, say, a birdhouse they're selling, they can do that. So that is completely doable underneath the guidelines.
Great. Good to hear it.
And there it is with the guidelines. There seems to be, there's so much interpretation and people are getting antsy. There's no doubt, but we will continue to do what we feel we're supposed to do and enforce what we need to enforce. But I will tell you, I say enforce, but the idea is what we've always done. We attempt to gain compliance by discussing with people and doing good things. And I think we did a really good job of that on Monday. I am curious to see what the news ends up saying because it might be a little different slant than what we walked away. But that's okay. We solved the problem for that day, and we're ready to deal with things if we have to. So, any questions, guys? After you've thought of this later, if you're getting there, don't hesitate to get a hold of me or Kathy. We'll make sure to answer any of your questions, and we sure appreciate your time. And I do anticipate we'll probably have to say before the 26th, I think it's probably important we do this one more time That is the one good thing about Zoom. I guess it's not dragging everybody out to come here. And even though this was a little longer than what we normally do to get this done in an hour and a half is pretty good. But the next time we would bring this back to you, and it'll be the week before, we'll look at it and then have some of those numbers where we can then make decisions when we look at the fund balance and some of those things.
What are we doing on Tuesday? Regular meeting, or are we doing budget?
We won't have this ahead of time. I mean, so we'll still start, but we won't have all those numbers compiled. To be frank, I think that. What time did we put on that? I'm sorry. I hope we put 5:30 in that 5.
We put 5 originally, but we
Okay.
can change it.
Yeah, I think I'll get with Sarah and we'll make a change on that and do that. And if you guys are comfortable, because I don't, there's no sense just saying we're going to meet for the sake of meeting on this, because I know by Tuesday we won't have all this compiled. And so I'd rather say we're going to do another one that might be a couple hours long, an hour and a half long later, but we'll just go with our normal meeting then.
So our normal meeting's at 6 though,
At
right?
6. Yeah. I would even skip the 5:30 and say we'd go normal meeting at 6.
Okay, yeah,
Folks
that's
give a
great.
lot
It
of your
makes
time.
no sense to meet just for the sake of meeting if we have nothing
Right.
else to add.
Right.
Matt, will we see the numbers ahead of time before the vote so that we have enough time
Yes.
to digest everything and ask
Yeah,
questions?
that's why, Audra, I'd like to do a set, and I'm looking tentatively saying like the Thursday before the 26th, whatever that is, and to say that we'll actually be able to go through that with you and do all that, and you'll have that so that by the following Tuesday, you've seen that, we've talked about it, you've edited it.
Can we have
That's the
those numbers
21st, that's 2
before
weeks
we
from
get,
tonight.
can we have those
19,
numbers
okay.
before we actually meet those so that we can ask our questions?
Yeah.
You know, like for me, I mean, I have to review them for a while before I know what
Yeah, and if
or
I
will
gotta
we
shift
just
that,
see them on Thursday?
if I gotta shift that date a little bit, we'll do that. And so, but that's our goal. I've told everybody by next Friday, we want to really be, this next Friday to really be in that position. So yes, we will definitely get those to you ahead. So you have that time.
We made some very good progress on getting through some things today, so I don't think it'll be a problem to get you something pretty soon. Especially
Today
now
was a
that we
good
know
day.
that, yeah, especially now that we know that everything that we're presenting is okay, that we
On
can
the table.
incorporate all those ideas into the budget, so.
So you're
We'll get
talking
it
maybe
done.
Thursday the 21st?
Yeah.
Okay. At like 5:30 again?
Yeah. I think, does that work best?
It works fine for me.
Can we move it back just a smidge so that we can eat dinner first?
I'm still at work. There's no dinner eating. I try to
Oh my
just do it and be done so I
Roxanne.
can go home.
You mean like 6?
Oh my God.
What time, what day are we talking about?
On
21st.
that Thursday, the 21st. I just feel like 5:30. You can't eat an early dinner and you can't eat a late dinner. Like it's the weirdest time.
It's like a Seinfeld.
Well, that's just me.
episode.
I like to eat,
Over
so.
dinner.
I like to eat unless you guys care if I eat on the meeting.
Audra, you could eat while we're sitting here.
Yeah,
I
I
wouldn't
would
mind
just turn
that.
your camera off and we won't hear you.
I guess I could have. I should have been drinking beer while my camera was off, but too honest for that. Oh wait, is this a public meeting? No, just kidding.
They could be on.
The public knows I drink beer. It's not a secret. So is it 5:30 or is it 6?
It's 5:30, my vote.
Me too.
Thanks a lot, you guys.
No problem.
We'll stay there. All right. Again, if you have any questions, guys, don't hesitate to give me a call. I talking about this is sometimes even better than talking about COVID and planning. So more than willing to take your call. Appreciate your time.
Thank you,
Have a good
everyone.
Thanks,
night,
everyone.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Good job.
Bye.
Good job,
Good to
Matt.
see you
Thanks.
all.